So, you're interested in joining my crew, huh? Well, you're making the right decision. Looking for a captain with years behind the helm? I've got him to spare. And I don't look a day over 229. My ship is armed with gadgets and gizmos aplenty, with all manner of failsafes to ensure everything ticks along smooth. Once you're on board this deck, there's no telling where we'll end up, but I can guarantee you we'll get there faster than your opponents. With me at the helm, you won't be disappointed. Even if your friends might be. You might know me as Jhoira of the Gitu, but lately, I've had my sights set a bit higher. Now, it's Jhoira Weatherlight Captain. For 2, a blue, and a red, you can summon me to your battlefield as a 3/3 human artificer. When you've lived as long as I have, you become a bit of a history buff, so I'll reward you with a card every time you cast any historic spell, legendary spells, sagas, and most importantly, artifacts. If you like drawing cards, my friends, you've come to the right place. Nearly every non-land permanent in here checks that box. My historic cup runneth over, and your hand will be too. The goal here is simple. We just want to play good, clean, fair Magic. Draw cards and cast spells. Nothing complicated or untoward. We just want to play for 10 minutes per turn by ourselves. Hey, I've got a lot of stuff to cast. We've got a tool for every job. Whether you'd like to make infinite mana, bounce your opponent's boards, or just steal every permanent from your opponents, we can totally get there. You might just enjoy killing your enemies with good old-fashioned damage. That's fine. We can do that too. If you're ready to go, then say one last goodbye to the ground. We won't be stopping much for land on this voyage straight to Value Town. We're running a handful of basic lands and some synergistic color producers like Glimmer Void and Spire of Industry to make sure that we can hit our color pips. After all, what good's a ship without a captain? And getting me down as soon as possible is critical to our game plan. We're also running one each of the artifact lands appropriate, Seed of the Synod, Great Furnace, and Darksteel Citadel, to make sure that we hit the required number of artifacts for Metalcraft, as well as any land that will help us get important pieces back from the graveyard, such as Academy Ruins or Buried Ruin. As much as I'd love to be including Scalding Tarn, I'd rather put that, wow, $80 investment into something the deck really can't do without, like Mox Opal or Grim Monolith. Jeez, who's the jerk who bought all these fetch lands out back in 2012 when they were like $12? Anyway, all the more reason to say so long to the cold hard ground and set sail. This deck's got a lot of combos, and if you're gonna join this crew, you're gonna have to learn how to pull them off. Let's start with the one you'll probably most want to get online. We can produce infinite mana using Dramatic Reversal. It untaps all of our non-land permanents, but the artifacts are the ones we're gonna care about. What's even better is being able to cast this card more than once. By using Isochron Scepter, we can imprint that Dramatic Reversal. Given that casting that spell untaps all of our non-land permanents, the Scepter will also untap, letting us recast the spell again. In order to produce infinite mana, we need only have 3 mana available to produce from mana rocks. Every time we execute the loop, we'll net 1 mana. The primary way to use this is to fuel our Walking Ballista. Provided we can get this onto the battlefield, we can put as many counters as we'd like onto it, and we can turn that infinite mana into infinite damage. If anyone tries to meddle with our broadside ordnance, we can respond by putting more counters onto it. The only way they're denying us is with a Krosan Grip. And if that happens, we have plenty of ways to get Walking Ballista back again. Making use of either Scrap Trawler or Mer Retriever, we simply sacrifice either of these to take the Ballista back, since it has a converted mana cost of 0 when it isn't on the stack. If we haven't primed our cannons and set ourselves up for infinite damage, we can still make sure our opponents are hung out to dry. All Vorthos-related war crimes aside, our good friend Memnarch has 2 handy activated abilities, one of which steals an artifact, and the other of which can give any permanent the artifact typing. This means we can steal everything in play, including lands. If we have the Isochron Scepter set up, this should be easy enough to make any opponent surrender. Memnarch does need blue mana though, so instead of just Soul Ring and Everflowing Chalice, we'll need to have cards like Chrome Mox, Mox Opal, and Arcane Signet in play. We run a total of 7 of these mana rocks, and technically we only need 1 of them to make infinite blue mana, as we can use colorless mana to pay for the Isochron Scepter's activation. With the sheer amount of cards we can draw, it's pretty easy to assume we'll have infinite blue mana, or red for that matter. This is important to keep in mind since you'll need that colored mana for counterspells. Infinite mana isn't the only way to shoot for the moon. We've got plenty of ways to cast our whole hand. mana be damned. Cards like Ethereum Sculptor, Helm of Awakening, and Foundry Inspector reduce the cost of any artifacts that we want to play. Combined with Semblance Anvil, imprinting an artifact, or Ugin the Ineffable's Planeswalker passive, there's no reason we shouldn't be playing any artifact we want for the low cost of free. And when we do need mana, we've got Ashnod's Altar, which lets us sacrifice a creature to net these two wingdings. The deck has plenty of cards that pop us out incidental creatures like Saheeli, Sublime Artificer, and Sai, Master Thopterist, both of which are legendary and draw us a card upon cast. Not to mention, plenty of our artifacts have the creature type as well. Also, Squee the Immortal is always around to take one for the team. Ashnod's also does a really good impression of Krark Clan Ironworks, which is a whole other can of worm coils that I don't exactly want to deal with in this deck. But long story short, with any cost reduction to artifacts on the board, you can use Ashnod's to loot Myr Retriever and Scrap Trawler for as much wingding mana as you want. In addition to these loops creating a bunch of mana, we're also going to rack up a whole lot of triggers for all those artifacts repeatedly entering the battlefield. And a good Artificer lets no resource go to waste. Reckless Fireweaver burns each opponent for 1 damage whenever an artifact comes into play, and will quickly capitalize on the aforementioned combo to kill all the other players at the table. Saheeli, Sublime Artificer, also helps this along by creating servo tokens to double up on all those triggers. Master Transmuter is a card that combines well with our Dramatic Reversal combo and Reckless Fireweaver. Being an artifact herself, she'll untap when we perform the combo, and so provided we have 2 artifacts to cycle in and out of play, she'll be able to use a ton of mana to really set off that Reckless Fireweaver. She can even combo with herself if you have Lightning Greaves. Recasting her, equipping the Greaves, and then activating her ability to return herself to your hand is an easy way to go near infinite, even when you're short on other artifacts. A good woman of science does everything in triplicate, so here's one more way to create a ludicrous amount of mana and card draw. This used to be way easier with Paradox Engine around, but alas. Good night, sweet prince. You are too pure a combo piece for this cruel world. But the deck isn't based around historic cards for nothing. We can do things the old-fashioned way. Cards like Voltaic Key and Manifold Key can untap our big mana rocks like Gilded Lotus, Mana Vault, Grim Monolith, Basalt Monolith, and our good friend Master Transmuter can either return the tapped mana rocks to our hand or the tapped keys to our hand to replay untapped. So far, I'm pretty sure you can handle things on your own, but if you want to really push the limits, I am nothing if not a great enabler. Remember that as long as I'm in play, I'll draw you a card every time a historic spell is cast. My favorite Dragon Pal, Niv-Mizzet Perrin, can convert these cards drawn into direct damage. Yeah, sure, he costs 6 colored pips in an artifact deck, and yes, it's not the most efficient way to win. Who cares about efficiency? Send a message. He's the best dragon in the multiverse. Psychosis Crawler is another redundant effect, and combined with the incidental damage from Reckless Fireweaver, we should have more than enough damage output to win the game without even needing to draw our entire deck. But the easiest way to make that happen is with Sensei's Divining Top. This little artifact costs 1 mana to play, and by paying 1, can help you get the top of your deck in order by rearranging the top 3 cards. We're almost never doing that though. More importantly, you can tap it to draw a card and place the top on the top of your library. It's incredibly easy to make this go a long way, given all of our cost reducing for artifacts. With any of these in play, the top costs 0, and that'll mean any other artifact we cast will redraw the top if we tap it and activate it in response to Jhoira's cast trigger, netting us a bunch of extra card draw triggers. If we're not using all those artifact ETBs and pinging our opponents to death, we should be charging up that old super laser. Aether Flux Reservoir will give us cumulative life gain for each spell we've cast in a turn. The first spell nets us 1 life, then 2, then math. With our cost reduction and card draw triggers, before our opponents know it, this fully operational battle station will turn your opponents into a fine organic mist in the vacuum of space. If we really want to take a big turn, we can cast Paradoxical Outcome to reset and do it all over again. There's a reason this card is paired with Emery, Lurker of the Loch, and Urza, Lord High Artificer in Modern, and we can create some of that magic here to increase our consistency. Emery is also great for getting our win conditions back, since she lets us cast artifacts from the bin, and rather than returning them to play, this lets us recur Walking Ballista with ease. If it's crossed your mind that we should be keeping track of the storm count while playing this deck, you're absolutely right, and probably my kind of person. Temporal Fissure bounces a permanent to an opponent's hand. and, in combination with an explosive turn from us, can easily bounce everything relevant on the board, including lands, right back to our opponent's hand. We can achieve a similar effect with the enchantment Words of Wind. Every time we'd have a draw trigger, we can instead pay 1 to force each of our opponents to bounce one of their permanents to their hand. They do get to choose, but given the amount of cards we'll be drawing, this little enchantment does a lot of work. To be a good Sky Captain, you need to be a Master of the Wind. Speaking of mastering the wind, we can summon up a Cyclonic Rift in short order. It's one of the most powerful blue cards in EDH, and we're playing it for sure. To complement this interaction, we have some powerful counterspells to prevent our combos from being blown out. Counterspell and Is It Charm are great, tried and true methods to deploy, and for 1 more mana, Disappearing Act will let us bounce a permanent back to our hand that we can replay later for extra gas. If we're desperate, we can persevere with sheer determination by casting Force of Will or Force of Negation. I've learned a few tricks in my time, and between those counterspells and tools like Spellskite or Padim, Console of Innovation, we should be sitting pretty safe. Ugin the Ineffable is again a bit of an all-star in this deck. He can give us cost reduction, while at the same time blowing up a pesky Rest in Peace, something our color combination can kinda struggle with. He's maybe the second best dragon. Before we depart, grabbing an Elixir of Immortality for the road is essential, given that sometimes you just don't get things quite right the first time. Whether that's because our engine crapped out on us or an opponent threw a spanner in the works, it's good to have coping mechanisms. Coping options. It's good to have options. We're well equipped to deal with anything, but the only issue might be finding it. I've got a lot of junk, okay? That's where you'll be glad to have me around. For every artifact we find, I'll hopefully be able to draw us into more. Be sure to have Thought Vessel or Reliquary Tower in play to avoid sending these extra cards overboard. It's a long way down. The only real tutor effects we have are in the land Inventor's Fair, or the second loyalty ability on Tezzeret the Seeker, if we really need to go grab something. This also means old Tezzy can get us any of our artifact lands for the cost of 0 loyalty. It's like ramp! Kind of. Nearly a third of the deck is artifacts that cost 2 or less, and a bunch of those are free to cast or close to it with the cost reduction, and most of the other cards are historic in one way or another, so I'm happy to zip through our library in no time at all. Speaking of time, there's nothing like just a little bit more of it in a pinch. We can take an extra turn with Karn's Temporal Sundering. As well as taking an extra turn, it can return a permanent to its owner's hand. Whether that be an annoying stacks piece of an opponent to stop us from going off, or just our own Phyrexian Metamorph to reset it. We'll be thankful of the utility. So, can I count on you to seek fame and fortune with the Weatherlight crew? If you join up, you can count on me and my marvelous collection of quaint baubles and world-ending super weapons to ensure we can win any engagement before our enemies know what hit them. If you're lucky. I'll even let you know where we keep the Time Water.
Well, cool. Sign me up. Hey, Jhoira. Long time no see.
Yeah, I actually got a job. Not that you'd know anything about that.
So that's why you're dressed like that?
Like a dashing fantasy world pirate?
I was gonna guess venture capitalist.
Didn't I send you back in time to the middle of a dangerous and very lethal explosion?
Yep, burnt my hair clean off, but no matter, I looked pretty good bald. Also, I bought up every copy of Fetchlands that I could get my hands on while I was back in the past. I'm gonna be rich as long as Wizards of the Coast never reprints them in a meaningful way.
You'll be fine. So have you caught up to the regular timeline yet?
Almost. For me, War of the Spark was just released. I am so hyped. But I gotta figure out which cards to invest in next.
Want some help?
I don't know.
A venture capitalist would never lie to you.
As an American voter, I apparently completely believe you.
That's what I thought. Now go buy as many Paradox engines as you can.
Oh boy, that's my favorite combo piece. It'll go great in my foiled out Iona deck. Thanks, Jhoira.
Drink up, me hearties. Yo-ho.
Is a power greater than that of my students, Jace, Chandra, Liliana, Gideon, and the other one. What is your counsel and advice.
Have you considered mech suits for the Planeswalkers to wear?
What, like Gundams?
No, Urza made these giant robot suits for the Planeswalkers to wear. They fired missiles and had bombs.
You are literally describing Gundams. We are not fighting Nicol Bolas in Gundams.